we all took it on the teeth. And so, yeah, but Purdue, Alabama, and Purdue helped me the last 3 days, cashing 2 5% winners over the final 3 days of this weekend. So that certainly got me back pretty much close to even for the tournament so far. So those were much needed wins. But Turning Stone was great for all those who showed up or all those who tailed along on social media. It was an excellent time. Hope you guys can make it some of our Wager Talk events in the future. It's a lot of fun. We all get together, have some good laughs, some cold vivas and more. And it certainly was a memorable trip, to say the least.
I'm already regretting that I own a very small portion of a tequila seltzer company because I drank enough tequila in Mexico last week to last me for the rest of the year. Yeah. But I'm going to rally for this weekend in Boston, maybe hit a Celtics game with our producer, Joe Ranieri. We'll see how the weekend plays out for us. But more importantly, we need some winners. I did go 3-1 in Mexico, and I will take that because I had an absolutely atrocious first couple of rounds. Hit a nice outright underdog winner, and that was it. 3 teams, 14-1. And that still didn't save me for how bad it was, Zeno. But we've got a late slate of baseball. We've got some NBA. And of course, we have some women's basketball. Iowa taking on LSU. Most notably, are we, let me ask, this has been a controversial topic today. Are you team Clark or are you team Reese?
Well, I mean, for the game, I am team Clark.
Okay.
Look, I'll tell everybody here, it was big game tips off, in about an hour. It was part of my package today. It was a client play. I backed Iowa. When you look at this team and this Iowa team right now, and you kind of hit the rewind button to what was last year's matchup, you got to remember a couple of things are different here. They're missing 3 of their top scorers, LSU is, from last year, in LaDasia Williams, Jasmine Carson, and Alexis Morris. Iowa obviously still has Caitlin Clark, but they're a much more well-rounded team this year than they were last year. And remember, of those 3 players, I think it was Morris was the one who was charged with guarding Clark. Now you have sophomore Flau'jae Johnson, who is going to primarily guard Caitlin Clark. And we'll see what kind of strategy Kim Mulkey employs here. Whether basically they said, look, we're going to let her chuck up threes from the logo. We're just not letting anything else happen with her. And that worked to their advantage. But I think this is a little bit of a better and more well-rounded Iowa team at this point in time. I know that the entire betting public is on Iowa here, but it's hard for me to really I don't know, Kelly, how do you feel about this? Since women's college basketball is now just recently starting to be a sport that's being bet, and considering there's only one game.
You're going to just stop with now starting to be a sport? Because that's where I thought you were going. And I was like, Zeno's trying to piss off the comment section.
Starting to be a sport that is commonly bet. Let me finish the sentence there. That I don't know how much I really want to take into account, the money that's going on. Plus, there are only 2 standalone games tonight, right? It's the USC-UConn one after and this one. So, sometimes when I see that, you have to remember there's only 2 real women's games to bet on tonight that, everyone's going to be drawn to. But also, Iowa's been the better shooting team in this tournament. LSU's failed to shoot better than 44% in 2 of their 3 games. I like Clark and Iowa to get it done tonight and cover the short number.
I am Team Reese. I don't think I'm going to end up betting the game. I'm just saying I like her better as a player. You can catch that entire rant on the Kelly and Murray podcast here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Speaking of the Wager Talk YouTube channel, you guys know what to do. Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. Drop us a comment on a game you want us to hit, whether that's the remaining baseball games for today or the NBA slate. Mark, I had to laugh because before we got on here, you and our producer Joe Ranieri were joking about the Portland team total. And boy, does that one sound disgusting. As somebody who's just started my NBA research, right? We all know I don't do a lot of it until after All-Star break. And then, of course, March Madness takes over once again. And I kind of forget about it until April. That one sounds absolutely disgusting. Was that a client play? Did you dare give that to a client?
No, I gave it out on the NBA show. Look, I mean, objectively, Portland's a bad team all around. They've lost 9 in a row, but they are specifically coming off a game where they only scored 82 points and lost by 60. Like 60 points, a half worth of scoring. They lost an entire game to a not very good offense in the Miami Heat. And so I think what's happening here is you're going to get a majorly depressed line for the Portland Trailblazers. And to set their team total at 95.5 is maniacal. Even though Orlando is a great defense, they're second in the NBA in defensive efficiency. They have held 3 of their last 9 opponents at home to under 100 points. I get that it's not hard for them to get under, 100 points, but getting under 95 is a different conversation because they held the Clippers to 97. I'm sorry, they held Toronto to 96. They held the Indiana to 97. Just looking here. Detroit to 91. I mean, it's really hard to get somebody to stay under 95. There's going to be a regression coming in the mean here. Portland still shot better than 40% in that loss to Miami. And what happens is when the game gets that far out of hand, the pace just dies. No one's pushing the pace, right? They're just, dribbling it out and going really slow because the game is unmanageable at that point. As long as they don't get down by like more than 20 in the first half, why they have to have some level of respect for themselves to come back from an 82-point performance where they lost by 60. I just think the number is way too low for me to go anywhere near it. I'll take the over 95.5.
Oh, boy, Mark, Zeno. On the Wager Talk odds screen, we're just going to go in order here until you guys drop a question. Brooklyn, Indiana. This one's interesting. Got some Pacers money, and maybe rightfully so, right? 227 and a half, 227 pretty much here.
Here's the thing. I'm sorry to cut you off. The
No
NBA
worries.
at this point is generally unbettable. There's not a world where, like with Orlando, you should never be laying 16
wait, time out. You mean within, okay, so like we had this debate, I'm trying to think of it was Hakeem and I, it might have been Andy Lang and I, talking about where the NBA is the exception to getting the best of the number, because I think you want to get the best of the information. Is that where you're going?
No, yes, I mean, that's true, but I just, like, in what world, Kelly, are you ever going to lay 18.5 points with the Boston Celtics?
Some degenerate out there is going to do it, Mark Zeno. They're going to do it because they just lost to the Atlanta Hawks. They're going to, here's what I think you got to realize, and you got to put your public thinking hat on, right? You've got to look and say, okay, what happened most recently with this Celtics team? What do we see? We see them absolutely dominant, right? They've covered 15 of their last 20.
Right.
Now we know Kristaps Porzingis is going to play tonight. Yeah, sure, they beat the Pelicans. But right before that, as 16-point favorites, they lost outright. Oh, and the game before that, 10.5-point favorites, they lost outright. Everybody is going to bet on them having a massive bounce back against a Charlotte team that is just riddled with guys out for the injury and or injuries themselves, or out for the season with injuries. Right. They're just a really bad team. So I think a lot of people will see this, and it's a one-game sample size. Listen, Boston could win this game by 40. And would that shock any of us? Absolutely not. No. But that doesn't mean that there's value in laying the 18 on the road with the Celtics team,
which is now popping up to 18.5 from one shop. So, I mean, so I think you have to look.
Well, that's the only money they're getting. Let's be real. That's the only money they're getting. And when you're booking bets like they are, they're going to have to just keep going higher because they're getting one-way action. They got to pray that a late bucket covers for the Hornets.
I mean, and that's not a position I want to be in, right? Like, I think when you get these double-digit spreads right now, I look at it as unbettable because I'm not paying the premium, even though it is the Celtics, for a game that, regularly, if this game was in February, in the beginning of February, you're looking at a 10 or 11, 12-point spread, right? Just because of where we are. But we know Charlotte has quit. We know Boston has nothing to play for, and yet you're going to price this thing at that number. So I think you have to look to alternate markets. Like, would I look at Boston's team total over and go, is that viable at I think it's 110.5 or 118. I forget what the number is. No, 118.5 it was. Like, that to me seems like a more viable number that Boston is going to exceed that. But do you even want to bet that? Because again, if they're winning by 20 at the end of halftime, the pace is going to die. They don't have to push it because Charlotte's not good enough to catch up. And then, take Memphis and Detroit. Do I want to bet either one of those teams? I get it's a 2-point spread, but I don't want to play a bad team right now with nothing to play for. So a lot of these games, I think, are just unbettable from a standpoint of the line is unmanageable. So that's why I look to alternate markets, and I would say, as bad as Portland is, just not many teams are held below 100 in the NBA nowadays. It's a scoring league. So I'd rather look at those markets and first halves where first half.
I would agree with that.
Like
to answer
Boston
to the
total, can they get to 58 in the first half? Yeah, they can because they usually score 60, 65.
That makes sense. Listen, double-digit favorites this year in the NBA. To answer to the Banks question, 157 and 30 straight up over the last two seasons, but just 79, 105, and 3 against the spread. That's less than 43%, guys. So just be kind of wary, especially when they're on the road, which I don't have that data broken down, and they're playing out of conference. So keep a couple of those things in mind when laying this kind of chalk. I agree with Mark. So if the NBA is borderline unbettable from this standpoint, we got quite a few coin flips tonight, right? I'm looking at the Wagertalk odds screen. Lots of, the Bulls are a 2-point favorite. The Pistons are a 2-point favorite. The Pels are a 1.5-point favorite. We already talked about the double-digit favorites in the Magic, and then I think the Nets, that are very shorthanded tonight, plus being 12.5-point underdogs to the Pacers is probably also unbettable. But do you like any of these, we'll call them coin flip games?
I mean, look, the Pelicans and Suns are interesting. 2 games separate them, with the Pelicans being at the 6th seed above the play-in line, right? So there is a motivation for them to try to stay out of the play-in game. And with 7 or 8 games left to play, depending on who it is, 9 games left to play, making it a 3-game lead over Phoenix is a lot of breathing room, right? You'd have to lose 5 or 6 of your final 9 games to get caught. So it puts them in a pretty advantageous position for the Pelicans to win. But here's the other rub about this, Kelly. I don't think there are really any teams in the NBA that care about seeding. Like, they just generally don't. Like, they know they have to go through the NBA playoffs, and especially guys like Durant, LeBron, and Steph Curry. Do you think they really care that they're in the play-in game? It's one more game for them. They know exactly.
I was just getting ready to say, I'm sure you haven't, but Teddy Covers and I did an NBA betting video over on the Wagertalk YouTube channel. And it was so funny because he said, Kelly, do you think these guys care about their seeding? No.
They don't.
Unless you're getting home court advantage, is there really that much difference between a 5 seed, a 6 seed, a 7? There's not. You're right. Even the playing game. What's one more game at that point?
It doesn't deter Durant, Steph, or LeBron. It doesn't deter them at all. They know how to turn it on in the playoffs. They know they're willing to accept the fact that they might lose a 1 game.
That's why they sandbag it half the damn year, because they know they got to be able to turn it on in the playoffs.
I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So I think it's interesting. New Orleans is at home. They just lost a bad game at home to Boston. They got smoked. They were up by 11, I think, in the second quarter or near halftime, and ended up losing that game by like 8. So it was a very interesting set of circumstances. New Orleans at home. This game is flip-flop back and forth. I saw earlier this morning that Phoenix was laying 1 in some shops. There were picks around. Now all the money has come in on New Orleans as it's 1.5 across the board in favor of the Pelicans here. So, and again, Phoenix is so tough to figure out because you have to look at the injury status. When they actually have Durant, Beal, and Booker on the floor, their analytics numbers are great. Like, their offensive efficiency is off the charts. Their PER is like 120. It's pretty insane how good they can be with the 3 of those guys on the floor. It's just a question of how much are they going to be on the floor together? How much are they going to play together? And do they even care about winning the game? All those things are up in the air. I'm just checking the injury report real quick on those guys. Phoenix looks like they're going to have everybody tonight for their big 3. And Phoenix has won the earlier game in the series in New Orleans. It's just the second meeting between these two. I'll tell you this much, though. The Pelicans are 12-5 against the number when revenging a home loss against an opponent. So a lot more motivation on the Pelicans side. I lead New Orleans here.
All right, I want to talk one more NBA game, and then we can talk a couple of the late baseball games. One game that stood out to me as very fishy this morning. I'm like, Detroit, 2-point favorite. This is a team that not only was one of the worst ATS teams in the entire league, they didn't even cover games, let alone win them. They've won just 1 out of their last 9 games. They don't win games at home. They have no home court advantage. But here's Memphis. They don't either. 1-7 in their last 8 games. They covered 1 of their last 5. Is this seem like a little fishy? Like, it's begging you to bet Memphis here against a Detroit team that can't get anything going at home. It looks like Gibson is doubtful for tonight, as well as Grimes is out. But I think we already knew that one. Cade Cunningham, still a question mark, at least on my end, Mark.
I mean, I agree with you that it's Memphis or pass. We have to remember one thing about Memphis. For as bad as they are offensively, this is still a team that, for a better part of the season, they just fell out of the top 10. They're now 11th in defensive efficiency. They actually play D, and they play it pretty well. It's a young team with a lot of guys who are trying to prove themselves, who have every reason to go out there every single night and try to fight it out. But also, their injury report, the Memphis Grizzlies, is as bad as the Pistons. You know, you have Desmond Bain, who's probably not going to play. Santi Aldama doesn't look like he's going to take the court. Conchar, their best three-point shooter, is not going to take the court. He's got plantar fasciitis. So they have a lot of injuries as well, and that's really where it is. I mean, would you be willing to take an under in this game, Kelly, and just not watch it and hope for the best that both of these teams barely get to 100? Because that kind of feels like the grossest of gross plays, but the one that is most likely to.
This one's been bet up from 213.5 at the opener, 216 across the Wagertalk odds screen, even at 216.5 at Caesars right now. So it sounds like the market disagrees with you there. I don't want any part of Detroit. Let's just be real, Mark. No. Like you said, it wouldn't be Grizz or pass, but I just feel like it's like one of those Ariel Epstein tweets with like the fishing pole. It's like the little fish at the end. It just seems just a little fishy. We do have a Caitlin Clark question in the chat before we get to baseball. So let's pivot back to Iowa LSU. They want to know 32.5. No way she won't go out there chucking shots. Mark, you mentioned this in your analysis. The Kim Mulkey said, hey, we're going to let her take those shots from downtown. Let her keep chucking them out. I agree. She is going to be chucking. 32.5 is, I know she is the all-time leading scorer in women's basketball. But the contrarian in me says, well, that one's built into the line. I'm guessing this one's probably at DraftKings or FanDuel. One of those two is going to be put out props on women's basketball. I don't know what the juice is, but I feel like it'd be plus money here on the under.
Yeah, I would tend to think so. And I mean, with a number that high, it's really hard to bet, right? Like, I mean, she just came off, I think it was a 40-point performance 2 games ago, whatever it was. And they're going to be keying on her. And yes, she's chucking shots up, but chucking shots up doesn't mean they're going in. I mean, I would think the plus money fade on the under is probably better. And remember, the defense they employed last year against her, as I mentioned earlier to Kelly, that, they're going to let her take those threes, but nothing else is going to happen. There might be a pivot from her where she dishes it off to other people and lets them create. It's almost like they're going to double her and there's going to be somebody open. They'll try to take advantage that way. I would lean more towards the correlation of like Iowa's team total over than Caitlin Clark's specific points prop, right? Like if they're going to win the game, they're going to get to 85 and Caitlin Clark likely is going to be close to 30, if not above it. And there's going to be a ton of scoring. So I don't know if I would go with a number that high. Me personally, that's tough. Like if I saw an NBA prop like that at a player at 32.5, I'm like, nope, too high. Just there's too much. There's too much that can go wrong. A missed free throw here and there, and they land on 31 or 32, and it's like you're dead. So I wouldn't play the over on her prop, but I would look to a team total over in the game. I think all those things are correlated to Caitlin having a very good game. If she doesn't, however, guess what? Iowa's losing, and she's going home.
There you go. We got baseball tipping off. Good grief. I'm still in basketball mode. We got baseball here in about 15 minutes. First pitch. See if any of the guys want to know about some baseball in the chat. Mark, any of these games before 7 p.m., Royals, Orioles, Reds, Phillies, Angels, Marlins, Rangers, Rays, you'd like to chat about?
Yeah. It's the Orioles and Royals. And this is a client play, guys. I'll give it to you here just because we're so close to first pitch in 15 minutes. I took the over in this game here between the Orioles and the Royals. So this is a Royals team that has a really good lineup. Now, the first 2 games of the year, they scored 1 run in each, and then they bust out the whooping sticks yesterday and have 11. Bobby Witt is one of these Major League Baseball players that nobody's talking about that might be in the MVP conversation when it's all said and done. But he's starting off the season, Kelly, batting .545 and slugging over 1,200. So he is the star in the middle of their lineup. This is a Royals team that I think is going to score a lot of runs, and they're going up against Dean Kramer of the Orioles. Went 13-5 last year. Why? Not because he was a good pitcher, but because he got a ton of run support at home. Over 5.5 runs per start at home did Kramer get last year. But he had an ERA over 4, and he was a guy that, just couldn't get a ton of outs. They're facing Michael Wacha. Yeah, Waka Waka, the guy pitched for the Padres last year. 5 starts in his career at Camden Yards, 4.13 ERA, 1.33 whip, allowed 27 hits in 24 innings. And this is a starter here who on the road last year was much worse than he was at home. So I think that this is a spot here where the Orioles continue to score runs. They didn't yesterday. This is one of the better lineups in baseball. they'll be able to get to Waka. The Royals will be able to get to Dean Kramer, and we go over 8.5. I don't know if the number is still at 8.5 now. I locked in earlier this morning when I saw it where it is. Yep, actually the numbers come down in certain shops. We're down to 8. Not a good sign for me, but I still think runs are scored here.
All right, let's take a question from the chat. Here you go, Mark. This one's fun from you. What's going on with the Astros? Mark, I know you're happy with that Yankee 4-0 sweep. How do you think they fare against the D-backs tomorrow?
I looked at when they posted that number. First of all, again, I have low expectations for the Yankees. I was very happy to see them sweep. In fact, they gave out the Astros yesterday as a free play, Kelly, thinking there was no way that the Yankees would sweep, and guess what? They did. So, but yeah, I think when you're starting Lucas Gill like the Yankees are tonight, like there might be 100 Yankee fans that didn't even know Lucas Gill was on the Yankees roster. That's how off this pitching staff is at this point in time. That total opened at 10 because, again, that score, Lucas Gill's not a great starter. I think they're facing Ryan Nelson tonight is who the D-backs are throwing out there. Yeah, it's Ryan Nelson. Not a guy that, knows how to get a ton of outs, but, a lot of that number might be a little bit inflated given what we saw from the Yankees in the opening series and Juan Soto in particular. Do you ride the hot bats? Do you ride the fact that the Yankees are going to score 7 or 8 runs in this game? I mean, recent history would tell you that. I just don't know. It's too early for sample size. Remember, this was a Yankees lineup last year, Kelly, that the second half of the season couldn't score in a whorehouse with a fistful of hundreds. Like they had no shot.
Listen, Ariel just put out an entire fangirl video talking about they resurrected like Jesus Christ on Easter Sunday. This is your fan base. I want you to know that. This is how excited everybody is. And I'm like, you guys, it's March. I mean, I know today is the first day of April, but yesterday I'm like, it's March. Everybody relax. There's a lot of baseball to be played. And as somebody who doesn't watch a lot of baseball until, September, October, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about either, but I do find it very funny.
I mean, listen, the game just started live, and you might want to jump in. I like the Nationals tonight too. They are a team that Pittsburgh they've scored the most runs in baseball, Kelly. They've scored 45 runs through their open. Like that's not who that lineup is. And they're undefeated. Like it feels like with Mackenzie Gore, the really sharp lefty on the mound for Washington, that this is a spot where they come back and get a win, especially if they're getting banged around by the Cincinnati Reds in the opening series. So if you want to jump in live, depending on what the price looks like, Washington moneyline might be worth a look. I think they're a good play tonight. I'm curious to see Toronto and Houston matchup. You're not getting a great pitching matchup by any stretch of the imagination, but Toronto scored a ton of runs. See how they do when they go on the road. And then do you want to bet the Mets tonight, Kelly, who started out 0-3 at home against the Detroit Tigers? Sean Manaea on the mound for the Mets against Reese Olson. That game getting underway in about 35, 40 minutes or so. That's, an interesting spot here for the Mets who, if they start out 0-4, the back pages of the New York papers are going to crucify them beyond belief.
Yeah, I saw that. Mets fans already melting down just a tiny bit. But again, guys, first day of April, everybody pump the brakes. There's a lot of baseball left to play. Mark Zinno, anything you have that you'd like to leave us with before I let you go?
No, I will actually load up. One of the plays in my package today, which is still up available, is for the NIT tomorrow night. One of the NIT semifinals going on. Really good angle here for this game. If you miss it, I'll reload it up later on for you guys, but it'll be available up on the site, wt.buzz/MZ. Riding a little bit of a heater, guys. Caught up really well at the end of March Madness, going 3-1 down the stretch there. It felt really good to get those 4% and 5% plays right. So we've turned it around after a rough round of 32 to finish strong here, and we'll keep it going as we go into baseball season.
Awesome stuff. He is Mark Zinno, at Mark Zinno on all your social channels. I am Kelly Stewart, at Kelly in Vegas. We'll be back tomorrow night. This week, we've got Andrew McGinnis. We've also got Ralph Michaels, and I forget who is coming on tomorrow. Maybe I should have done my job and double-checked that. Let's see. What do we got? Andrew Wednesday, Ralph Thursday.
I think it's Trig.
It is? No, it is not Trig. I'll find out. That being said, Mark Zinno, good luck on your wagers tonight. I cannot cheer for Caitlin Clark, but I will cheer for you. I hope you guys have a good one. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the Wagertalk YouTube channel. Give us something in the comment section. Help us out with that algorithm because we are here for you guys taking all your questions every night, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.